My name's Monk Rowe for the Phileas Jazz Archive at Hamilton College. I'm very pleased to have Jason Palmer with me this morning. 9:30 a.m. is used to be that jazz musicians didn't know about 9:30 a.m.
Right? Yeah. It's either coming home from a gig or, if you look at those like really consequential Blue Note records, a lot of those were started, they started recording at that time. And, I met Fred. Well, I'll just start off with a story. I met Freddie Hubbard back in the late 90s, and he told me a lot of those records that they made, were recorded in the morning. And so there were times when they would play a gig and they play several sets and it end at 3, 4, 5 in the morning. They go have breakfast and then go to Rudy Van Gelder's place. So yeah.
I wonder if that's adrenaline kicks in. Coffee and whatever else sometimes resulted in terrific records. I remember Joe Williams had the same story about when he did the Thad Jones Mel Lewis recording with, and no one had gone to bed yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, it's early May, and you have Berkeley and the New England Conservatory. I wonder if it's sort of crunch time for you and your students.
Yeah, well, I had my last teaching day on Wednesday. So all set with the classroom stuff. I just have to turn my grades in and I have promotionals at New England Conservatory on Monday. So I'll be truly finished at the end of the day on Monday. So, but yeah, it was a race to the finish line with all the recitals and finals and all that stuff. So, but yeah, it was a joy to work with the young artists.
I watched a video of you um, talking about jazz education, and you you felt it was necessary to instill. This is my interpretation, some history and the role of jazz in America. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most valuable contributions this country has made to the world. It really it exhibits the potential that we have to all come together. This music integrated before baseball. There's been significant contributions by every part of the society to the music. So um, I think those little historical things need to be also taught beside the playing part. I think it's important for us to have a perspective on, the history of the music and why people played, how people play, how people got together, the stories behind the songs, just all the important things that you usually would find in liner notes.
Liner notes. That's where my education came from. And I had made a note. You had sorry about that fan. You had a recording called Places, I believe.
Hmm.
And you had extensive liner notes. And I said, yeah, I gave that a thumbs up.
Hmm. Yeah, I write all the liner notes to all of my records. I've gotten about 20 of them out commercially, and yeah, I've written yeah, to all of them, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I'm debating. Do you hear that noise as much as I do?
It doesn't bother me.
Okay,
But yeah.
we'll proceed, and it'll go off in a while. You know who agrees with you about what you just said is Lionel Hampton. I had the pleasure of talking to him, God, like 25 years ago, and he said Teddy Wilson used to play when Benny Goodman took an intermission and no white musician was on stage. Then Teddy would play by himself. So I was the first one to break that tradition down. But the thing about it, there was no black and white playing together, no place. Not in moving pictures, not in baseball, football, no kind of sports.
Yeah. Hmm. Yep. Yep. There you go.
Oh, how do you find time to work that into your lessons?
It depends on the student. At Berkeley, I teach in the ensemble department. So a lot of times I'm coaching ensembles. And so what I do is when I bring in repertoire, I try to bring in songs that have stories behind them or some kind of historical reference or whatnot. And I try to take at least a week where we'll maybe go have pizza, or I'll host a recording session, not a record a listening session where I'll play recordings, historical recordings, and we'll just talk outside of class time. And I usually do that towards the end of the semester,
Hmm.
especially for the students who my role at Berkeley is I work in the ensemble department, and there they have certain levels for all the ensembles in order for all the students to be hopefully placed in groups where they all have the same or similar level of playing and experience. And so I'm dealing with levels threes, fours, and fives, which is the mid level. Seven, six, seven, eight are the upper level. So I'm dealing with a lot of students who are pretty new to the music. They may not know who all the great players are. So um, I tend to spend a little more time, bringing in historical recordings and even some recordings and charts of our contemporaries that are really writing music that has really strong steep in the tradition, but also, trying to find new things within compositional practices and everything. So I try to do a mix, and it all varies from ensemble to ensemble. Some ensembles I'll get where a lot of the students want to play straight ahead, and then I have some ensembles where they want to, learn the modern thing and play songs from contemporary. So what I do in the beginning of the semester is I always interview the students in the ensembles. I'll ask, okay, what have you been listening to? How long have you been playing? Did you grow up in a musical family? Um, and all the good things. And so what that does is it kind of informs me as to what they like and what I think could help them get to the next level. So based on what they already know and where their skill level is, then I'll just bring in things that I think will really augment their time, with me in the semester.
I'm going to guess that you have to be prepared not to react negatively when it's like a trumpet student and you say Roy Eldridge and they have a blank
Of course.
response.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of look back to when I was their age, there are a lot of trumpet players I didn't know about, and thank goodness I had teachers that were on the scene that knew who was who, and they got to be in the right direction. So yeah, I can never really blame, the young folk for not really knowing. It's when they're in front of me, I think it's my responsibility to, share what I know and hopefully, light a spark, give them an aha moment to say, okay, yeah, I've never heard of Roy Eldridge, Roy Hargrove. I've gotten great trumpet players who've never heard Roy Hargrove, and he was on the scene for many decades up until less than 10 years ago when he passed away. So yeah, it's like you just accept them where they are and you just kind of build them up. That's my
Your sense
MO.
of as an educator, a responsibility to make your students aware of the employment opportunities these days, making a living in music. Do you talk about that? Like, here's what you need to know, and here's how you need to be.
Yeah, that comes up a lot, especially with students who, at Berkeley, they have a lot of different majors. You can major in music business, you can major in production, engineering, music therapy, whatever. But you also have performance majors, who want to, focus primarily on performance. So, with those students, I tend we talk about what you need to do, how you need to be prepared, and also I try to show them this is a program that you should be going to in the summer. You should think about going to Siena, going to Jazz Ahead, or going to Ravinia, and meeting people who are serious and forming those bonds because generationally those are going to be the players that you're going to be playing with for the majority of your career. I mean, that was my experience. And so, I try to relay, the experiences I've had and also understand that, my experiences won't necessarily be their experience, but I just have to let them know, okay, this is what I went through and, it's a possibility for you as well. Another thing that I like to talk about a lot is royalties and having your music published and having it registered so you can really recoup, the royalties that you're entitled to, even outside of just recording your music. Because I think a lot of students they know that, okay, if I put a record out, then if it gets radio play or whatever, I'm entitled to royalties. But they don't really understand that if you play your tunes at a gig, then you're also entitled to royalties because in this country, a lot of those performance venues they have to pay, a fee in order to have music at the venues. And so there are programs set up through BMI and ASCAP and all those, CSAC that, give royalties towards live performance. And so I always try to talk to them about those different kind of avenues of income possibilities. But yeah, it's always a challenge for sure. It's
You
a
do you have to do something from your end if you're playing in a club in New York and you have your original music in a set, are you supposed to do something to inform those organizations that you indeed have played your original music in X club on X date?
Yeah, absolutely. In the US, you do. I'm registered with ASCAP, and they have a program called the Performance Plus Awards Program. And so what you do is you fill out. You can do it once a year or twice a year. You fill out a form that says, okay, on this date I played these tunes at this venue, and you have a whole spreadsheet. And I think it's retroactive back about a couple of years now. Maybe it's gotten wider. So um, if you just join, you can still have, if you have a record of, where you play, if you got programs and all that stuff, so where you can really track what you played and where you played. And once you submit those forms, those those songs, they all in the venues, they all have a algorithm, based on how much they contribute, how big the venue is, and the publishing deal you have with the compositions that you play, that all generates a fee that you'll get as a royalty payment. And so, depending on how much you play in the US, there's fees that you are entitled to, because a lot of times, though people don't do it, and you know that money is staying in the accounts of those professional right PROs organizations. And it's just sitting there drawing interest, and the musicians, don't have a means to track it down. But in Europe, it's different. When I play a concert there as a leader, the director of the venue, they'll come to me and they'll bring the form to me, and I just write down, the songs that I played. I'm sure a lot of musicians who've been to Europe and abroad have experienced that kind of thing, and so then you get royalties that way, and you only have to fill out a form. In the U.S., it's all done online
Yes.
now. I mean, since I've been doing it, it's all been online.
I've read your list of albums under your own name, and then I guess about 40 albums as a sideman. Um,
Yeah, I'm up to about 100 now.
now you're good.
Yeah, it's up. Yeah, it's not up to date. Yeah.
Well, that helps me with my question. Why? Why do so many other jazz musicians want you on their recordings? So set your modesty aside and tell me.
Oh, geez, I wish I knew. Well, the trumpet is a very I wouldn't want to say unforgiving, but it's an instrument that takes a lot of work to really make it a malleable instrument. It's an instrument that it takes a lot of, you got to do a lot of work on yourself. I mean, you have to, it's kind of like being I don't know, like an opera singer. You have to have proper breath control, embouchure support, and it's unlike most all other wind instruments. Maybe French horns maybe is just as challenging of an instrument to perform on. But I think for me, I put a lot of work into Geez, that's a tough question. But you know what I did in college is I did a whole bunch of transcribing. I transcribed as many different trumpet players as I could. When I got to New England Conservatory back in 1997, I probably knew five trumpet players off the top of my head. I knew Clifford Brown's playing. I had transcribed some of him. Miles Davis. I was familiar with Dizzy, Louis Armstrong, and Freddie Hubbard, and Nicholas Payton. My trumpet teacher in high school introduced me to the music of Nicholas Payton. We listened to Gumbo Nouveau, and Whoopin' Blues was one of my first transcriptions. I transcribed him. And so when I got to NEC, my teacher, bless his soul, he passed away back in September, John McNeil, told me about all these other trumpet players I needed to listen to. So what I ended up doing is, going out, finding records and recordings and going to the library and listening to LPs of all the other players that influenced the players that I had already listened to. Fats Navarro, Roy Eldridge, Chet Baker, Woody Shaw, Lee Morgan, just so many other great players. And I started transcribing, learning as much as I could, just taking in things, going to concerts and sneaking in the Wallies. I was underage at the time, and so I did a lot of transcribing and just absorbing different styles and in the hopes of trying to get to a point where um, I had like a visualization of like going into a room of a whole bunch of trumpet players and saying, okay, Miles is over here, Fast is over here, blah, 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 blah. This is the whole trumpet creative space. Where's the empty space that I can find where I can just lay, all of the stuff that I'm playing and just be there and have it be a thing where it's identifiable, but it's still influenced by everybody else in the room. So I try to absorb as many different styles as possible in order to try to find out who I'm truly am as a creative person. So when someone listens to me, they'll say, "Okay, that's him, that's Jason," because there's a little bit of Booker Little, there's a little bit of Freddie, there's a little bit of who, but it's all not, it's none of those people. It's just like a combination of all those people. And so I want to say that people that hire me might hear that in my plan. But that's kind of not a question for me, I guess.
Like,
But
don't
I think on the
solo.
other side of it, I really enjoy like playing in other people's bands and helping them bring their music to life. I end up getting called to play in bands with people who write really complicated music that's beautiful at the same time. Um, so I don't know, that could be a thing. I don't know. There's a handful of us that are in that realm. When I listen to other trumpet players who have influenced me and my generation that are like that, I think of people like Ambrose Sakamusri, Jonathan Finlayson, Sean Jones, Philip Dezak, Adam O'Farrell. Those trumpet players, they have that thing where they have a very unique, recognizable voice, and they also have this musicality that allows them to be almost chameleon-like, where they can fit in a lot of different situations, which is something that we kind of have to have nowadays because very few people I know play in just one band and they just do that. Unless you're a leader and you got a lot of support. But as a trumpet player, I've made um, a hefty amount of my career has been from playing as a side person in other people's bands. I'm doing my first tour as a leader overseas in October of this year, and I'm 46 years old and I've never taken a band out under my own name. But so all the traveling that I've done has been in other people's bands up until now.
Congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks.
You make me think of you're talking about finding your own sound, and when we started this interview project back 30 years ago, I was speaking with the older generation, and a lot of them would say, "Oh, everybody sounds the same now." The sax players sound like either Charlie Parker or John Coltrane, and Sweet Edison was going on about how in his day you could recognize someone in one note, and he said this. He said, "We used to say we'd be the rather be the world's worst originator than the world's greatest imitator.
Hmm.
And of
Yeah.
course, Sweetsy's a good example. Like, he plays a couple notes and you can usually tell him.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
your sound reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Wilder.
Oh, I love Joe Wilder. Oh,
And,
I got a story for about that.
oh, yeah.
You know, when I was a student at New England Conservatory, I befriended the great trumpet player Jeremy Pelt. You know, he pulled me off the street. He literally pulled me off the street. I was walking down Mass Ave in Boston, had my trumpet case over my back, and I was coming back from Tower Records, going down Mass Ave, past Berkeley, which he was about to graduate from, and I was going towards New England Conservatory. He saw a trumpet on my back, and he said, "You play trumpet?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you going to Berkeley?" I said, "No, I'm going to NEC." He's like, "Oh, you're going to NEC?" And so he said, "I want you to come with me." And this was on a Sunday. So we walked down Mass Ave and we went past my turn to get to NEC, further down Mass Ave, and we went to a club called Wally's. And I had never been there. I never heard of the place, but they were having a jam session. And so he brought me in. He's like, "Okay, I want you to play something for me. Go up there and play a tune. I want to hear you play." And so I went up and I played, I never forget, I played Out of Nowhere. I barely knew the tune, so I just kind of played by ear. And he's like, "Oh yeah, you sound good, blah blah blah. But you need to work on this, you need to work on that. Come over to my house next week and I'll give you a lesson." I never met this guy, but he told me to come over, and so I went over to his house and he started playing some records for me. And he told me about Joe Wilder, and so he said, "Yeah, there's this record I've been looking for called Wilder and Wilder, and if you find it, you know, um, let me know, and you should buy it, man. We can listen to it together." And so that summer, so a whole school year passed, and I went home for the summer. I'm from North Carolina, and I went home, and one particular night I was going to go to the grocery store. I forget what store it was. It was like a Target kind of store that had food and miscellaneous things, shopping stuff, and so I had just enough money to get some food because I was going to buy dinner and cook some dinner at home. I think I had like $20 or something. So I got some groceries. I was standing in line to go check out, and right next to the bubble gum section was Joe Wilder, Wilder and Wilder. I kid you not. It's like it was placed there right for me. And I only had $20 to my name. I put the food back and I got that record. It was a CD. It was a CD. It
I
wasn't an
have
LP.
it.
Hmm. Yeah, that version of Cherokee.
Yes, indeed.
When students want to learn Cherokee, I was like, you gotta learn it slow. Listen to this, and Joe Wilder's playing is so angular, and it's 1956. And it sounds like it could have been recorded, yesterday. He and Hank Jones, oh man, their playing is just so fresh, and his sound so lyrical, just tone.
One of my
He could have
favorite,
played in any major orchestra.
yeah, in fact, that was his aspiration when I got to know him fairly well, and
Hmm.
he wanted to be in a classical in a situation. And at the
Hmm.
time, there was no black players and it was just not an opportunity that he could pursue. And you can hear that classical training sometimes in his improvising or his
Yep.
articulation. So thanks for sharing that story. That really makes me smile.
Me too.
Yeah. The current scene that you're saying after all these years, you've finally led a band. Do you have to get an agent um, to really make that happen for you?
Yeah, well, the I have a local band, a band of cats in Boston that I play with regularly. We did a concert last week for International Jazz Day, and so that band, we've done things, regionally. We played the Chicago Jazz Festival and stuff, but for my last two or three records, I've used people in New York, and so they're slightly different projects with different kind of compositions and everything, and so I recently got a booking agent that's based in Berlin. The organization is called Attaché Plus Plus Plus, and it's run by a the director used to work with the agency that booked Kurt Rosenwinkel. And so her name's Charlotte Jestat, and she started her own company. And so she's been bringing in people. And so when my latest record, the crossover came out back in December, we decided to try to throw some dates together to feature the players on that on that record. And so Mark Turner's on that record, and Marcus Gilmore and Larry Grenadier. And so we're trying to sell that record, and I got Mark on the tour. He was available to do it, and Jeff Ballard is able to do it. Marcus Gilmore wasn't able to do it. So in order to like have certain venues have interest, since me myself, I haven't worked a lot as a leader. So, I kind of have to have some high-powered people as side people in my project in order to get interest from a lot of venues in the uh, on the European circuit. So, um, yeah, I don't think I could have put together the dates that I have it's going to be in October. I don't think I could have done it by myself. I think I would have needed somebody like Charlotte that's on the inside that's already been working with, these various venues. So, but it's not impossible. I do know people who, put tours together by themselves, and they'll work all the logistics and do all the booking and everything. So, that kind of thing isn't impossible, you know.
You brought up the crossover, and I had a question about. I think it's that's the name of the tune as well, correct?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was listening to it, and I couldn't find one.
Oh, okay.
You know what I
Yes, it's
mean?
in three. It's in three.
It's okay.
Yeah. So,
I was thinking it's very complex, all the parts together, and I wondered if you heard that in your head before you wrote it down, or was it sometimes when I use finale, I write things almost by accident and I hear them
mhm,
back and I go, hey, I like that. I wish I'd thought of it, but it sort of was a happy accident.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, I write everything from up here. I don't write from an instrument. I mean, I've written a few tunes from the instrument, from the trumpet, or I started playing guitar a little bit, but I've never really written a full tune off of the instrument. But I think with that tune, there is a four chord motive in the beginning that's similar to a Tad Demeron turnaround. You got the one and then the flat three and the flat six, the resolve back to the one. And so I put all of that in three. And so the pulse is here. I don't want to get too nerdy, but it's like doom, 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 1, 2, 3, doom, doom. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, doom, 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 doom. And the bass part is on the E of the following the preceding beat. So that's why it's kind of hard to really hear where one is. But the drummer Marcus, he lays down where one is. Um, so so the rhythmic thing in Marcus's playing can really show you where it all is.
Thank you. I'll go back and listen to that now and I can sleep tonight.
Yeah, yeah. It's in a three where the quarter note's about 100 beats a minute.
Yeah. All right. I've got a question I've been working on, and maybe you can help me actually just form it, but it seems that jazz has had differing and changing roles in society. If we think back when very early days, it was new music. Um, then it became really high entertainment, pop music, sort of in the swing era. In the 50s, you had sort of bebop characters and the Dizzy Gillespie sort of persona, some civil rights connections in the 60s. This is my own opinion, but do you feel that jazz has a role in society, American society now? What is the role of jazz?
Yeah, I think it has the role to tell the truth about, you know, the individual's experience, the collective experience of whoever the artist is and where they are, geographically, regionally, um, and also to be able to tell a story and have what you have to present be something that you can share with people. I think this music is a social music. It's a music that's meant to be, played for people, with people. And yeah, I think that's something that we can really benefit from in terms of like really knowing what the possibilities of playing an instrument in a creative way can be. That's why I don't think this music will ever go away because the creative aspect of it will always draw people in to want to play, even if there are no gigs. People will find a way to make their own gigs, find their own, make their own possibility, go out and play on the porch. There are porch fests everywhere up in New England, There was some in my neighborhood when I was living in Boston. So there's uh, like a very local component that I think needs to be um, grown and nurtured. Especially when you look at, all the defunding that's happened with the arts organizations and everything that's going on now. I think we're really going to have to really show the importance of playing music together. It's just as important as throwing a basketball or passing something. The importance in cooperation, teamwork, listening and building and getting better in development. That's all, in this type of music. And also there's so many things that we can learn about it because it's intergenerational. I could go and play with, 15-year-olds. I played with a young tenor player last night named Emilio Modeste. I mean, he's a spitting image of like I thought I was playing next to Wayne Shorter. He's probably half my age. And then, I played with, Sharon Jones, a great singer that's, in her, 70s. Um, and so I think that aspect of it, the social aspect and the history of it, along with what we can contribute to it, there's always something new that we can contribute to it because there's always new stories that have a soundtrack to them. And we can also write based on history, and sometimes, you put out projects and it informs people of the history because you just put out a project and, it informs them. Like I did a project on the stolen artwork from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. I wrote a piece for every um, piece of art that was stolen. And so,
I was going to ask you about that because I noticed some interesting titles in your work. Line for Dr. Cornel West,
mhm,
and even an inspiration for the Sudoku. You wrote a Sudoku suite.
mhm.
Do you, I'm not sure how to ask this. Do you look for inspiration or does it arrive somehow and you take note of it?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. I've gone through periods where I'll have several months where I'll just go, and go to a museum. Like I went to the Gardner Museum and I just noticed the empty frames. And I said to myself, what does that mean? And then I found out what those empty frames in the museum meant. It was a symbolism hoping for those stolen art pieces of artwork to come back. And so then I went online and I found the actual pieces of artwork and I just, stared at them and read about the history of them and the artists. And then I tried to um, infuse the techniques that they used in those paintings into the compositions that I wrote. There's a Rembrandt painting called A Lady and Gentleman in Black, and it's a painting of them. And they're dressed in black and they look very regal, and it looks like they're about to go have a night on the town. And so I wrote a song um, where the melody is comprised of all black notes on the piano. So stuff that's like literal to that degree. Um, and then some other things are a little more subtle, but yeah, those kind of things. When you can connect history and current events with music, I think this music is more malleable than other genres, I'd say, that can really you can fuse, melodic content, you can bring in multimedia disciplines, and then you got the whole improvisational piece to it where you can really express how you feel about something all within one song. That's what makes the music really unique.
That's a terrific answer. Have you ever written a piece that has no improvisation at all in it?
Um, I don't think I have. No, that's my next goal, I guess.
Well, the reason
Yeah.
I asked is I've done a few, and it's always the same thing. You feel it's going well, and you listen back to it, and yeah, I like it. And then you look at in my case, the clock on finale, and oh, okay, I've written 90 seconds of music.
Hmm.
It's tedious because we get so used to maybe having a set of chord changes and writing this nice melody, and we're happy, and then we're going to stretch it out. We're going to improvise on it.
Hmm. Yep, yep. Hmm. Yeah, I've written some songs where I didn't have the goal of myself improvising on the song, like I wrote them for other people. Um, I think I first heard that on a Jeremy Pelt record. He recorded a song, I forget the name of it, but he didn't even solo on the song. And I thought, oh, this is cool. It's his record and he wrote a song and there's these other people soloing on it, but he didn't solo on it. That's really generous. But yeah, I think the next level is to write a song that's just through compose and just have it really be its own thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a mental thing where for me, I've always written where the improvisational part of the piece is the goal, the arrival point. Like you write this melody to get to the solos as opposed to, the other way around. I did a trio record that's going to come out this winter in December. And playing trio with trumpet, bass, and drums was really challenging to try to have the set of music not be so much where it's like head, solo, head. And so there are a few pieces where, I wrote out a sketch of a melody and some chord changes, but I said to the band, okay, let's just start. We're just going to start improvising. And then we're going to play the melody at the very end of the song or in the middle of the song and then have it be something like that. So yeah, it's a journey and a path. But I think, yeah, writing a song with no improvisation, and just see how you can develop it. And I think it's a really great idea.
over the years, I've had, especially in middle school age, promising musicians, but they were really shy. And I saw you speak in an interview, and you described yourself as a quiet person. And I used to say to these shy young musicians, think of your instrument like a prop, like when an actor gets a cane and a hat, they're transforming themselves. And I wonder if you ever
Hmm.
thought about your trumpet as a prop that allows me to step outside of my regular personality.
Yeah, I think the trumpet has that ability more so than other instruments. I taught in the public schools for about 12, 13 years, and I taught woodwind and brass. So I taught clarinet, tenor, alto, trombone. I had some trumpet students, and um, yeah, it's like the trumpet has a certain magnetism that attracts certain people, certain types of people, really loud, outspoken people, or maybe really reserved people that want to have something that's on the opposite end of what they are. And then you have some that have something that they want to be exactly what that is. I want to be loud and brash, Maynard Ferguson style. And then you have other people like, oh, I want to, really make this brass instrument that wants to be loud and high be something that's more subtle, like Chet Baker or somebody else. So yeah, for me, it's probably a mix of that, but I'd say I've really gotten a little bit out of I mean, I've gotten older and, developed more as a person. And so I kind of come out of my shell that way. But I think just being on the educational side of things really opened me up. And I've really gotten education back in 1998. I went home during one of the holiday breaks back home to North Carolina. And I have a younger brother who he was in grade school at the time. And I went to his school and I read a children's book, a few children's books to his class. He was in about third or fourth grade. I can't remember what grade he was in, but I went to the library and I read to all of them and just to see their faces really light up after I was reading something to them and said, "Oh, wow, I can make a difference in these young children's lives. Let me learn more about music and maybe I could teach." And so just by having that experience, it kind of influenced me to and inspired me to get to a point where I could learn more so I'll be able to share more and that helped me come out of my shell. So I think just being in the classroom so much has kind of helped me not be as shy and be as quiet as I described in what you read. So,
I think you're right. And among the things I've done, one of the toughest was learning how to deal with like kindergarten and first grade classes. If
hmm
you can figure that out, that makes a lot of other things just seem easy.
yep. Yep. Yeah, I had a few of those classes and every semester when I was teaching in Boston, I always bring in music. We learn how to play and everything, but I say, okay, we got to listen to some music. So I sit them all down. I put on a recording of Monk, speaking of Monk, Thelonious Monk, and I tell the kids, okay, when this music comes on, do whatever you want to do. Just don't hurt anybody. And nine times out of ten, they all dance to Monk. And so I was like, okay, this is what the music does for people when they don't have any inhibitions. They always would dance in us. It's like, okay, that's what it is.
That's a heck of a coincidence because last night on the way home, they were playing Thelonious Monk on a Sirius jazz station. And he was really into the hitting these chords where no one else would do it. And, Charlie Rouse I mean, the whole thing was very physical. And so
Yeah.
I can almost picture that class you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about a particular gig, and this was probably going to be tough because this was in 2019, and the video of it is online. A gig with Jerry Burggoni, and you started out with stablemates, no piano. I wonder if that probably was a choice, like you lay out on the first tune. But there was a moment after that, and you were going to play. You followed that with all the things you are. But there was a couple minutes where you and Jerry were like, put your heads together and you were having a conversation. And
hmm
I think it was like something to observe for students. Can you possibly recall what you were talking about?
Oh, you mean we were physically talking
Yes,
about
you were
something?
you were sort of facing the drummer. You weren't addressing the audience. It's almost like I assumed it was like one of those things. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You play the first eight. I'll do, like you were doing
Yeah, yeah.
instant arrangement.
hmm Yeah, yeah. We were playing up in Portsmouth at a place called the Press Room. We've done a few concerts, Jerry and I. Jerry was one of my teachers in college, one of the great, artists of our time. One of the greatest tenor players ever. A great educator too. I took private lessons with him at NEC. Yeah, I think in that moment we were either for those gigs we didn't have a set list. So we were either talking about how the tune we were playing was going to go or what we were going to play next. Um, and yeah, that's probably all that was. And yeah,
And then it happened. And then it
yeah.
sounded
hmm
like um like it was just like it was supposed to be.
hmm
That's one of the great things about this music is that A little pre-planning can go a long way with if people are being creative.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell my students all the time, it's important to know as many tunes as possible because you never know where you're going to be. You can be on a session, um, at a jam session, and somebody that you really admire could be in the audience, and you want to play with them, and so you come up to them and say, "Hey, let's play a tune," and they say, "Okay, what you want to play?" And they might call a tune that that you learned, and it's like, okay, then you make that musical connection, or you can be in a place like I've been to jam sessions in Russia where people don't speak English. I don't speak any Russian, but I whisper over to say, okay, yeah, stable mates. Okay, yeah, let's play that. And they say, yeah. And so then we play that. So yeah, that's when they say it's like a music is a universal language. There's a melodic language to it that really connects people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important to be able to communicate
Yeah.
that way.
One more comment about that gig we followed with Moment's Notice, and it was bright. And I was wondering, in a tune like that, at that tempo with chord changes flying by, are you thinking of the chord changes as you're playing to guide your note choices, or is it something else?
Yeah, I mean it's that. I mean you have to be able to speak on a tune. It's very important to know the inner workings of it, I'd say. Um, but I say ultimately you want to get to the point where you can play over the tune, but you don't have to think about what those chord changes are. You just know what the phrase is, and you can like speak over how the melody that I want to play because I'm a single note instrument, so I can only play one note at a time. So it's like I have to know how what melody I'm playing relates to the actual melody of the song, and how the voice leading works and how I want to resolve things. So there's a multitude of things and also knowing if I know the chord changes, I also know which notes I can hold over a set of chord changes. I know the common tones, I know the guide tones, I know the rhythm of the song. Um, you listen to people like Louis Armstrong, they could just play one note and just vibe on that one note and have it speak over a whole song. Just imagine Louis playing over a moment's notice. It would it would be swinging, you know. When to use space, when not to play, when to let a chord pass by, you know. Um, that song's so harmonically dense. It's like you don't have to play on every chord change. If you feel like you need to do that, then you can end up, using what we would call run-on sentences when you're playing music, and you don't want to have that kind of thing, especially as a wind instrument player. I was at a clinic by Joe Lovano years ago, and he talked about how horn players are so used to having what they play when they improvise be determined by how much air they have in their lungs. And it's like they just keep playing, keep playing, keep playing, keep playing, keep playing, until they're almost out of breath. Take another breath and keep playing, keep playing, keep playing. It's like that's not how we speak when we're, having a conversation with people. So we can't really phrase like that. So, breathe, let the chord pass by, let your thoughts pass, let some space. And I find that when I get into that space, then I make music that's more impactful. But for me, I get excited sometimes and I want to play over every chord on every chorus. And you just got to have the discipline not to have that kind of thing. So
You find that there's been occasions where you play less, a bit less, because you're working with such wonderful, a wonderful rhythm section.
yeah, yeah. I've been playing with a tenor player, Mark Turner. I've been in his band for about 10 years now and a little over 10 years, going on 11 now, I think. Yeah. And we've done some clinics together at certain schools and everything. And he did this one exercise that I learned a lot from, where he brought a horn player up and there was a rhythm section accompanying. And so they all played a tune, but he told the saxophone player, he said, okay, so when the tune starts, I don't want you to play anything until you hear something from the rhythm section that is worth responding to, or something that you can contribute to based on what they played. Because a lot of times horn players, they'll get up and they want to just play their stuff and have other people follow them. Whereas he said, okay, I want you to listen. Maybe listen to the drummer's snare, or maybe listen to the piano player's left hand, what kind of rhythm they're playing, or maybe the bass player is playing a certain, harmonic or something, And so I said, wow, that's a really cool way to go into a solo when you're improvising, just to say, okay, I'm going to be influenced by what I hear around me and only play that,
Wow,
and
that
have,
takes, yeah, a lot
and,
of
and so
discipline.
yeah, you don't go in playing a lick bass solo. You go in like truly improvising based on what you hear around you. And so that's a real unique tool to use.
Is there anything on the bandstand that you've either observed or experienced that you find aggravating?
Um, at this point in my life, just seeing people that aren't enjoying themselves on the bandstand. That's probably the most general answer I can give to that. Or somebody that's just not giving energy. I think energy is something you can feel it, you can hear it, and you know it when it's not there. I always harken back to this story that I think Max Roach told about Clifford Brown, where after a concert, a lady came up to Clifford and said, I don't know what you played tonight, but you sure played the hell out of it. And so I've always tried to live, on the bandstand with that kind of thing, because you never know when Clifford died when he was 25, and so everything we have of him, you could sense that he was really playing um, in a way where there was this reckless abandon. It was like he's going to play his best at all times. He never really dialed it in. I can't detect any dialing in his playing. And so when I hear players that that I know and admire and you know and come to expect something like that from, I mean, that's disappointing. I wouldn't say aggravating, but yeah, probably, yeah, disappointing. But that plus, as I said before, not enjoying being on stage. I think even as an audience member, you don't want to look like you're not having a good time. The music's already dense enough, and to see somebody up there, not really into it, that's a drag, especially if, if it's a gig where you like paid to go see a band and, everybody's like this, play the solo and then go to the side like this, like snap your finger a little bit, get into it. Cheer your band on, get them sometimes they need an uplift and they need a little, yeah, something
Yeah,
to get them inspired, um, and I've had people come up to me and they'll say, "Yeah, you really look like you were enjoying yourself up there. I really enjoyed that." They
it's
may not have understood, the sharp nines I played on every chord or whatnot, but they said, "Yeah, I really enjoyed that. You all look like you were having fun up there. You sound like you were a band." And we need more of that. Every band needs to do that.
you just reminded me of the last time I did a adjudicating at a high school festival, and we were required to go up and talk to the band afterwards. And I went up and I said, the band sounds great. It's okay for you to smile.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
the students were so like serious, and there was no acknowledgement of their fellow band members when they got up to solo or anything. I said, you gotta like loosen up. And
Hmm.
as you said, it's contagious.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
audience is going to like your band better if you do that. They may not even know why, but
yeah.
it's going to.
That's another thing, is yeah, I don't want to go too deep into it, but just being able to relate to the audience outside of just playing. When you play a tune, explain what the tune is. Explain, the name of it. If it has a story, it's going to inform them, and maybe they'll imagine it differently when they hear it. So, I think it would benefit us greatly to have the ability to be able to speak about the music that we make, that we compose. We got to be able to give a 30-second elevator speech as to why we should have our band hired, or what makes it great, you know. So, when I go hear a band and they just play the whole time and not say anything to the audience, I mean that's happened before, and I get it. I mean, some people are quiet. I even I play in certain bands with certain leaders who are very quiet, and even me, I'll just say the leader's name at the end of the concert, like blah blah blah. Check him out, yeah. Yeah, everybody claps. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, just a few words about what you do, I think goes a long way. And it helps sell the music.
yeah,
You say, okay, I wrote a song about my three cats and we're going to play it right now. And it's on my new record. And then at the end of the concert, somebody comes up to you and say, yeah, we really like that cat song. And we got some cats at home. Can I buy your record? And
well done. It reminds me of the three times I saw Cannonball Adderley years ago.
mm,
He was a master of that.
yep,
He
great
just,
orator. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Um, this has been a marvelous conversation. Um, I'll wrap up with one more quote, and I think you'll be familiar with this because it comes from your website. Supporting live music is environmentally friendly, stimulates local economies, and feeds the soul. Skip the things, invest in experiences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I kind of touched on that earlier when we were talking about the local thing being a thing, just growing communities and then it's kind of like a web, like a spider web. If you look, like back in the days we had circuit bands. You travel a circuit because you go to a community and they had their thing. They territory bands, all that good stuff. You know, yeah, it's all important. More important now, I'd say we need art, very much now. So, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, get off the computer and go see something live.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Jason. This has been a delight, and I hope your European tour is a big hit.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that, Monk. Yeah, absolutely. Gonna have some fun.
All right, I'll just pause us here, and we'll say our goodbyes.
Yep.